just a hack. He's just an absolute hack. And he gets his ass kicked by his teammates every week. It's just, it's terrible. It's just terrible.
Welcome back to the Believe in NFL Draft Prospects podcast. I'm Joe DeLeone here with Ryan Roberts, and we are moving on with our interior offensive line rankings. Today, we are doing two very interesting prospects. We ended up having two guys that have two last names, that being Sedrick Van Pran from Georgia, John Michael Schmitz from Minnesota. Van Pran much, much younger than Schmitz in this situation. I have to say, though, Sedrick Van Pran might be one of the coolest names, one of the most underrated names in college football this upcoming season.
No, it is, man. It is. He was kind of the young guy in the middle of that Georgia offense, too, because they had obviously Jamari Salyer, and I know Broderick Jones is going to be a junior now, but he was kind of the young guy, and I feel like he didn't get much talk during the season at all, but I was pretty impressed with a lot of his film.
I feel like it's really easy to be overlooked on that offensive line, too, because both of those tackles are really, really good, and then the entire offense was highly talented. So one person's going to get overlooked. It should have been Stetson Bennett, but it ended up being Van Pran to an extent.
Well, man, I mean, that's Heisman Trophy candidate Stetson Bennett, national champion Stetson Bennett. I don't know what you're talking about.
Alex might argue with us and say that he is a Heisman candidate, but we do not sit in that boat.
We do.
Nonetheless, though, Ryan, we've got two offensive linemen that are a part of this class discussion. Maybe both of them are not in this class come the end of the cycle. We'll discuss that. Before we get to it, though, I just want to tell you folks about today's sponsor, that being Bet Online. Our partners at Bet Online continue to be the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, including updated odds on the NBA and NHL playoffs, Major League Baseball fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino and poker games. It's super easy to get started, so head to their website today or use your mobile device to join and use our promo code BELIEVE to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. So starting with Van Pran, Ryan, discussing him, he is a very young prospect, which is odd to see with centers that are good enough to be draftable and to be in a draftable range that Van Pran is being discussed in. But he doesn't play like a guy who is, I think you said yesterday, he's 20. He's very, very young. Mm-hmm. He does have some flashes of that awareness, that intelligence that we talked about on yesterday's show. But overall, I think you get that understanding of why he's come so far along with the level of experience that he has around him on that Georgia offensive line.
You want to feel old for a second, Joe? You want to feel old?
No, I don't.
October 23rd, 2001 is when this young man was born. 2001, man.
Crazy thing is it's only a 3-year difference.
Right. Well, yeah, I know. Oh, well, you're young. I forgot. I was born in 91, so
yeah, you're the old man on the show. I think I would have been a senior when he was a freshman.
Oh yeah, it's not that bad then. It's not that bad at all.
Maybe he came in the class right after. The COVID eligibility thing has completely messed up my understanding of time, especially with these prospects. By the way, shout out to Minnesota for actually having a separate section on a player's profile that indicates the amount of available eligibility they have. Shout out to them because it's the only one that I've seen.
Some schools are starting to do that, and some schools are actually just labeling guys super seniors instead.
That's
which
so
helps.
lazy.
Why is that so lazy? And at least you're like distinguishing these guys, because like you could be a 5th year senior and still have that 6th year. You know what I mean? Like
I'd rather they do what Minnesota did. But getting back to Van Pran, what did you like about him as a prospect? I always come out with my take first, and I want to get yours first before I likely disagree.
Well, similarly to the two guys we talked yesterday in Jared Patterson and Ricky Stromberg, this is a little bit of a taller center. He's listed at 6'4", 310 pounds. And I mean, he has some good weight on him, man. Like this kid, I think could be 325 pretty easily and still have the athleticism that he has. For me, Sedrick Van Pran may have the highest upside of any center we've watched so far this week. I think that he has some legitimate tools, man. Like I think he moves well. I think he has some easy power to his game. The thing for him, though, is that he's only a 1-year starter, right? Like you talked about the experience factor a little bit. I think everything's a little raw. Like the consistency that he plays with on a snap-to-snap basis, the aiming points, just the nuances of hand usage. Like there's some things that I think are just very green. I almost said yellow. Yellow would not be the thing. Or a little green to him. But I think I don't know.
Making up scouting terms out here, man.
I was just not even scouting terms, just being stupid there for a second. But he, I think that everything is a work in progress from a technical perspective right now from Sedrick Van Pran. But I think that the tools are bananas, man. Like this kid could be. This kid, I don't want to make this huge comp, but he reminds me a lot of Marquise Pouncey. Like there's a lot of similarities, I think, there.
I think you're higher on him than I am. I've definitely like Stromberg and his upside better than I like Van Pran's, and he's further along. He's played longer.
I think that Stromberg is a better player, and I also like Stromberg's upside still for what he could be. But I think if both players equally hit their ceilings, that I think Van Pran maybe is a better player. But I mean, Ricky, not to burst the bubble on this week, but Ricky Stromberg's my top center in this class. He is.
I shouldn't be surprised by the way you talked about him. What games did you watch of Van Pran? Because I think I set myself up for failure watching him play against Michigan and then him play against Alabama. I saw that we had tape for those. I'm like, let's watch two of the better. I definitely
watched Michigan. Let me pull up my notes real quick. Well, let me ask you, Joe. What's the hesitation on him for your side?
It's less of a hesitation. I understand the upside. I don't think I saw as much of the athleticism that you highlighted. I think it's there. The one thing I definitely am a hair hung up on is the technical skills. I do agree that his angles, his firing points of contact that he's going for, very inconsistent. His hand placement, very inconsistent. There were a lot of times in those games where I felt he was out of position, and that resulted him in losing reps. You mentioned the power. I don't think I saw it as much, and I think my rationalization of that lack of power is not that he doesn't have it, but I don't think he uses it effectively and knows how to use it effectively yet, because there were reps that you're talking about where I remember against Alabama, he kind of like hip tapped Christian Harris and he sent him like straight into the ground. Like it was like a quick little punch right into his hip and he put him right in the dirt. Like that to me is power. That's raw power to be able to do that. But then there's these other reps where I'm watching him and it feels like, he's kind of playing patty cake a little bit. Like he's just trying to shove guys instead of latching on and driving, which is something that's going to come with time. But like, I'm always afraid to fully, he's much further along and I like him better than I like Zion Nelson, but it's why I wasn't that into Zion Nelson as a prospect, because the upside projection is obviously important to value in these situations, but I'm always just a little hesitant to bank on that stuff without getting to see it actually come to fruition.
So, quick note, I also watched Michigan, I watched Alabama, and I watched Clemson, but I can't remember if he started the game or not. I just watched it in general from a watching perspective, but I'll go back to my notes on the Clemson game at some point. I'll say this, he's a lot more stylistic. When I say that he has tools, he's a lot more stylistically comparable for me to a Stromberg than a Patterson. I think Patterson's more finesse compared to those guys, and he's more predicated on creating movement with angles to his game. I think that Stromberg and Van Pran are both, they create power, right? Like they are explosive athletes is how I would describe them. I wouldn't say that I would say Cedric Van Pran is like wide zone made to, dominate type of player, but I think that he has a profile with his size and his athleticism combination where he could play in a gap power scheme. He could play inside, outside zone. He can do a little bit of everything. So I think that it is projection, Joe. I know you mentioned in the beginning of the show a little teaser that like maybe they'll both be in the 2023 class, but I could see this kid being a 4-year player and being a 2024 kid. I think that he has a lot of room to grow, My point, though, is that I think that the upside is quite good on the next level if he hits it.
I don't disagree on the upside. I think I just would like to see a little bit more from him before I'm willing to really buy in.
That's fair. That's fair.
The other guy, though, John Michael Schmitz, is definitely further along, much further along. I think he's definitely at or has hit his ceiling because he's been there for so freaking long. He's a 24-year-old prospect.
He's gonna be 24 during his rookie year, man. This is a seasoned vet in the Minnesota program, John Michael Jingleheimer Schmitz, if you will.
Is Jingleheimer actually a part of his name, or are you messing with me?
No. Have you ever heard the it's like a nursery rhyme, like John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmitz? You know what I'm talking about?
Never in my
His name was my name too.
I don't know what they did when you were growing up back in the 1920s, but
the 90s were a great time, man. Great time in the 90s.
I'm glad I missed the 90s.
I'll send the clip to you afterwards so you can listen to it. It's a great nursery rhyme.
Ryan, I think for what a team might be looking for, if they're looking for a more complete center and maybe you're not as willing to buy into the upside, I think John Michael Schmitz is an intriguing name to consider. He's certainly very much further along. I really saw the power though, man. He knows how to use his power.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, because like I thought the power was good. Did you not think he was a good athlete? I think he's a really good athlete.
No? I thought that he was a pretty good
Okay.
athlete. I didn't say that I didn't think he was a good athlete, but like the power thing, I think that the power, there were a number of plays against Purdue and Wisconsin that I was watching where I thought that it really flashed. I don't think he has great leg drive. Like
I don't think he has great length either to him.
Yeah, he's kind of got some slow moving feet when it comes to actually driving, but that upper body strength makes up for it to an extent because there are some plays where he's really just shouldering people, he's popping people. I think that he has a little bit more juice than a guy who we were just talking about with Van Pran. I don't think uses it as effectively, but I think Van Schmitz, for a team that wants to draft a center early day 3 and plug him in, and he might start at like a very average level, to below average level. I think he certainly has that.
Yeah, I was just looking on our database, Joe, and he has 32 and an 1/8 inch arm. So
It's
a little
not
bit
bad
of
for a center.
it's not awful. No, it's actually longer than Jared Patterson, which is still pretty wild to me. But
what is Van Pran?
We don't have officials because he's a third-year junior, so he didn't get measured.
Okay.
So, but we have the measurement obviously on John Michael Schmitz. One of the first plays I saw, Joe, because I agree the power is there for sure because Minnesota asked them to do a lot of power scheme in their system. But then also I felt like they really increased the amount of outside and inside zone that they ran this past year. So first play I saw, man, he reached like a 3-tech front side, and I was like, oh, my guy can move a little bit, man. He's got a little giddy up to him, and he's actually bigger than I thought. I think he came in and verified like right around 6'4", 320 pounds. So he's a pretty densely built kid. Yeah, he's not as small as I didn't think he was small on tape, but I didn't think he was like the biggest guy in the world because I thought his movement skills were really good. But I mean, this kid's I agree, like early day 3, sure, maybe late day 2, depending. But I mean, either way, this kid, I think, is at worst going to be a really good backup player inside. But I also think that he has starter upside for a outside zone heavy team. Like, I think that this kid can play some football, man. This is, for me, the easiest known commodity in this class, right? Because it's like some of the guys, we just talked about Sedrick Van Pran, where it's like ceiling here, floor, John Michael Schmitz, like the ceiling and the floor are very close to one another. Like, I can't see this kid just not being in the NFL in a couple years. I just think that he's ready to play on the next level, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I wanted to throw in there, I literally put in my notes, I try to have some type of descriptor for their body type. I just put big boy center. I spelled boy B-O-I because that's what he is. He's a
big boy,
very big boy. I also referred to Van Pran as thick with 2 C's for anybody who's
thick, man.
Who's wondering that. No, but that's where I'm at with Van Pran is that I don't want to buy into him as like as a day 2 pick. I think that's way too much of a reach just because other higher quality centers that have been drafted in those slots, I think have much higher upside than a guy like John Michael Schmitz. But exactly what you just said. At the very least, this is somebody who is going to be a backup interior offensive lineman that I think can play guard, can play center, that you hold on your roster to do those things. I don't think his starter value is going to be at guard, but he very well can step in and play center for a team right off the bat. Like I think that Van Pran, depending on how he looks at the end of this season, I still am not 100% sure if I would be willing to trust him as a starter, as a rookie. Like he might be somebody that needs a little bit of time to get acclimated. Maybe you throw him out there to get acclimated, but he's like a center that you draft end of the third round and then hope that he kind of figures it out towards the end of the season, but is going to have consistent struggles throughout the year because of those inconsistencies that we talked about with technique and placement.
I talked the upside comparison to a Van Pran, like maybe he's a Marquise Pouncey if he figures it fully out, but I also do think there's some Cesar Ruiz to his game that came out of Michigan that has not been great for the New Orleans Saints, because he's kind of he played center at Michigan. I actually thought his film was pretty good at Michigan, but he's kind of moved between center and guard and just hasn't been very good. And he's kind of like that same, are we saying thick boy center? Is that how we want to phrase him?
Yeah, thick. He's thick all the way around. I think that's the descriptor for guys like that.
He's a massive man. And Joe, that reminds me, we make sure that you watch Steve Avila out of TCU for the recap show this week. He is a 6'4", 339 pounds.
Oh my God.
Center.
Too big for a center.
It's way too big. He had a pretty decent grade from NFS, though, if I remember correctly. So you actually probably should watch him. I haven't watched him fully yet, so I'm going to. But you were just talking about really thick boy centers, and 6'4", 339 is pretty outrageous. So, but yes, going back to Van Pran, I think the comparisons that I'm making are to say that I think that the ceiling and the floor are pretty spread out, right? Like there is definitely some worry over what is a reasonable expectation for him. I agree that I don't think that he should be pressed into starting super early in his career. I think that he should probably be eased along if he declares for 2023. I mean, it could be a completely different animal if he stays for another year, and then he could be a completely different guy. But for 2023's sake, if there aren't massive improvements, then I agree with you. John Michael Schmitz is just for me, Joe. Like, I think that I'm going to grade him lower. I think we're going to grade him lower than what his NFL career is going to be. Yeah, because like I think we're both going to be relatively in the same ballpark, like early day 3, like probably around 4 grade, right? Like somewhere in that ballpark. Yes. With like, good backup, maybe spot starter upside or, part-time starter upside, however you want to phrase it. But he reminds me of a player that's just going to start in the NFL for like so long and not ever be great necessarily, but always just be a good player, like that's what I see for John Michael Schmitz. I just think he's a good football player.
I don't know why, but I always mix up this one player with other guys. Corey Linsley, that's his first name, right? The Chargers center. State.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like I feel like that's like not a player comp, but like a circumstantial comp of like he's just always been around and he's been a starter on the Packers and he was good enough to be offered a good contract with the Chargers. Like that's somebody like I think I totally agree with that. I think Michael Schmitz has that in him.
There's guys that just fit that profile, man. Like even think about like Ryan Jensen that plays for the Buccaneers, man. Like he's never actually been a great player. He's just been a good player for a long time. He plays with an attitude.
He hasn't been bad enough to get kicked out, basically.
Yeah, exactly. He's been good. He's been better than what's been behind him, right? Like that's what I see with John Michael Schmitz. Like I would not be surprised if he's like 8 years starting center in the NFL. Not a ton of Pro Bowls to his credit, or maybe not even a Pro Bowl to his credit, but just not replaceable. Like just a good football player. That's what I see with him.
So I gave my round projection for Van Pran. I said no, I wouldn't take him any higher than the third round, like late third round. Yeah. Where would you take a guy like Van Pran?
We're the same spot. I would take him late day 2 as a developmental player inside. Yeah, because I also think that he gives you. I think that Van Pran could be a guard at the next level too. Like I think it's possible, but I think he's most likely a center. Like I'm not saying that he will be a guard. I'm saying that he has some backup potential to playing guard as well, and that for me is in that third or later round projection. You want those guys that can play multiple positions inside at worst, right? So I think he has that type of stayability, I guess, if we want to phrase it that way. But ultimately, I think that he is a guy that needs to be eased along slowly. So late day 2, developmental guy for me. And then I think Michael Schmitz is more of a low ceiling type of guy comparative to him. But I think that, you get that guy in the early day 3 and maybe he surprises you a little bit.
I think the word that you could have just used is stability instead of stayability, but sure. What's
Stayability, man. I like stayability.
Making up draft jargon.
I usually say sticking point, but I'm gonna go with stayability.
Okay. Well, we're making up draft words today.
That's fine.
Folks, that's gonna be it from us. Thanks for tuning in. Hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening, if it's on YouTube or any listening platform. Follow us on Twitter at Joe DeLeone, at Rise and Draft, and at NFL Prospects Pod. Put your stupid book away.